I was recently in a show about the Irish Easter Rebellion of 1916. The Irish had been oppressed by the British Empire for 700 years leading up to this rebellion. The rebellion took place right here in Dublin, in Ireland. The show was with the local theater company, the Crowded Kitchen Players, and it was directed and adapted by Ara Barleeb. In the show, I got to play this great Irish revolutionary named James Connolly. I had never heard of James Connolly before I was in the show, and I knew from nothing about Irish history. But I did my homework to study for the role. I read several books about Irish history, and I read two books written by James Connolly himself. Then I noticed on one of my favorite leftist websites called the Greenville Post, on the front page of the website at the bottom, there has been a picture of James Connolly for years, and I never noticed the picture until I was in this show. And the quote on the picture is right there. "Governments in capitalist society are but committees of the rich to manage the affairs of the capitalist class." James Connolly was a Marxist, in a very similar vein to his contemporary revolutionaries, such as Vladimir Ilyich Lenin, Mao Zedong, Leon Trotsky, and the next generation of the revolutionaries, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara. Che Guevara was actually 1/4 Irish. He was raised in Argentina, but his Irish grandmother would tell him endless stories about James Connolly and many of the other great Irish revolutionaries. After Che Guevara and Fidel Castro led the successful Cuban Revolution in 1959, Che was flying back from Moscow to Havana. He stopped off in Dublin, where he was treated like a hero, and he went into a bar, became friendly with a bartender who happened to be an artist. And it is that Irish artist who painted the iconic picture of Che that you see on all these t-shirts. The big difference between James Connolly and all these other revolutionaries was that they won their revolutions. Then they had to defend their revolutions against the entire rest of the world that was trying to crush them. They had to use violence sometimes to defend themselves. And because of that, they have been demonized by Western propaganda ever since. James Connolly lost his Easter Rebellion of 1916, and he was immediately executed. So, to this day, he is still very much revered, at least in Ireland. And to this day, there is a statue of him that stands in Dublin. And the quote on the statue is, "The cause of labor is the cause of Ireland. The cause of Ireland is the cause of labor." Besides James Connolly, there were 6 other men who led the Easter Rebellion. The other men were all Irish Catholic middle-class men who were highly educated. They were poets, scholars, teachers. They were very strong Irish nationalists. They wanted to free Ireland from the British Empire. They wanted to save Irish culture, particularly save the Irish language, Gaelic. James Connolly was very different from these other men. He was raised in the slums. He had a 3rd grade education, but he self-educated and became a Marxist scholar. He became a prolific journalist, and he was a very powerful union organizer and became a great public speaker, and he didn't have Toastmasters to help him. And Connolly never trusted the middle-class leaders. He had felt that historically, the middle-class leaders had often sold out the Irish working class to get a better deal for themselves from the British. And 95% of the Irish Catholics were exploited industrial workers or very poor tenant farmers. That was James Connolly's constituency. And Connolly believed that if Irish Catholic capitalists took over the country, they would exploit the workers just as much as the English Protestant capitalists. Nevertheless, Connolly did join forces with the middle-class leaders to fight the common enemy, the British Empire. James Connolly also lived for a number of years in the United States, where he participated with the socialists here. He was a member of the International Workers of the World, the Wobblies. This was a time when the socialists in the United States were a very powerful political force until they were crushed by the ruling class here, which threw thousands of them into prison, and they essentially murdered the great socialist leader, Eugene Debs. Connolly then returned to Ireland just in time to help lead the Irish Easter Rebellion of 1916, in which he lost his life. In this series of speeches, I'm going to bring James Connolly to life for you, and many of the other great Irish revolutionaries down through the ages, in particular, Pádraig Pearse, who was the main leader of the Irish Easter Rebellion. Pádraig Pearse is kind of like the George Washington and the Thomas Jefferson of Ireland rolled into one. But before I get into the Irish Easter Rebellion itself, in the next two speeches, I'm going to run through very quickly 700 years of oppression of the English over the Irish that led to the Easter Rebellion. And one of the first people that we'll be talking about in this historical part of the speech is this guy, Henry VIII, one of the first people to have a major attack on the Irish. But that will be for the next time.